In line with that story, how can Nigeria get more children to attend school if those that are in school do not feel safe? A trend of attacks on secondary schools and kidnapping patterns have been volatile. So how difficult is it to secure schools in Nigeria? Babajide Ogunsanwo, data scientist and information consultant, is here to share his insights. Babajide, great to see you.
Good
still
evening,
scribbling away as usual. So is there any acceptable reason why it is difficult to protect schools in Nigeria? What facts do you have?
There are reasons, but these reasons to the parents can never be acceptable. I would like to start with the words of Nelson Mandela. And before he died, he had said, education is the future of Africa. And so when children in schools are being kidnapped, what it really means is that excellence is being kidnapped. Tonight, there are good news and there's bad news. I'd like to start with the good news, and that's we taking a look at the data we have on the distribution of secondary schools in Nigeria. That's the good news. Enrollment in schools. And if we look at the enrollment figures, the evidence shows that, yes, a lot of children are out of school in northern Nigeria, but a lot of children are also in school across northern Nigeria. And so the large pool of students provides an incentive for the would-be kidnapper to attack. We've seen the evidence that within the northwest region and the southwest region, we see about 5 million children who have been enrolled in public and private secondary schools. And at the moment, the incentive for the kidnapper still outweighs the risk that the kidnapper faces when he makes that attempt to kidnap. So in all, 10 million plus children who have been enrolled into secondary schools are at risk of being kidnapped. That is the good news, the data that we have on the existing distribution of schools in Nigeria. Now to the bad news. The bad news is the data that we've seen in front of us is obsolete data. What do I mean? The last available record on the number of students that have been enrolled in Nigerian public and secondary schools, the last public record was dated half a decade ago. The last public record on the aggregate number of public and private secondary schools in Nigeria, in other words, how many public and private secondary schools do we have in Nigeria per state? That record and that report was dated a decade ago.
So there are no current figures? No
current figures. Try and look for information on how many public and private secondary schools are in each of the 774 local governments in Nigeria. That report does not even exist. So the question tonight is, how do security agencies plan security when the most important detail, location of secondary schools, number of students in secondary schools, how many private secondary schools do we have per state, per local government, who exactly has been enrolled in these schools, and who exactly is attending these schools? That is the basic point that we need to start when we want to plan and improve security for our schools. And that information is all obsolete.
So then how do security agencies protect schools if they don't have this data?
And that's the reason why some of these things continue. So a lot of times what we see the security agencies do, which is not their fault, which isn't their primary purpose to get this data. These schools are classified as private schools and secondary schools. And that is exactly what we need to do. Institutions need to take more responsibility in being able to account for what exactly is going on within your state and within your local government. We could look at the example of the United States, for instance. When in the 80s, they didn't have a school kidnapping problem, but they had a bank robbery problem. And what did they do? They followed the data. The FBI special agent that was in charge of following that data then was William Rader, and he said 3 words: understand the landscape. And without data on schools and students, there is no way security agencies will be able to understand the landscape.
How then do we understand the landscape of security at secondary schools?
So the first is to be able to look at that landscape which I'm talking about, and in specific look at the area, and we then have to rely on even using this obsolete data to understand what is going on. And then once we have current data, we'll then be able to provide an updated statement of fact. But if we look at the landscape, and here's where I want to focus a bit on, what exactly is going on in southern Nigeria. And using the data that is available, there are 4 classes of how easy it is to protect a school in southern Nigeria, and those are the 19 states. Lagos State has an average of 175 schools per 1,000 square kilometer. What this means is that Lagos State has the highest concentration of schools within a region. It makes it a bit easier to protect because you have a lot of schools within a concentrated region. It makes it more effective and efficient for security agencies to deploy to areas where schools are not scattered around, where schools are concentrated. And in southern Nigeria, Lagos, Imo, Anambra, and Abia State are classified as being relatively easier to protect. Category 2 has Osun State, Akwa Ibom, Enugu, Ebonyi, Ekiti, and Rivers State. These states are not as easy to protect based on the concentration of schools because you have schools more scattered about, but they are still easier than the other two categories. Category 3 has Oyo, Cross River, Ondo, and Bayelsa. Bayelsa State has only about 34 secondary schools scattered across 1,000 square kilometers, and Category 4 has Ogun, Delta, and Edo. Let's look at what's going on in northern Nigeria, and that shows quite a huge difference. Yeah. We see in Category A, Kogi, Nasarawa, Abuja, Gombe. Those states are classified as being relatively easier to protect because they have a higher concentration of schools per 1,000 square kilometers. It is more effective again and more efficient to protect schools that are closer together than schools that are further apart. And we see those red states from Taraba State, Benue State, Yobe, Borno, Zamfara, Bauchi, Sokoto, and Niger State is the most difficult state to protect. The reason why Niger State is the most difficult state to protect is Niger State has the largest land mass, and based on the distribution of schools, it has only 6 schools per 1,000 square kilometer. And that is the challenge. We have a lot of schools that are scattered around, which makes it tougher to have effective and efficient
Hopefully
security.
the rights authorities are looking at this data that you have provided and will do the needful. Babajide, always a pleasure having you here.
And in final analysis, let's not forget,
10.
when children are being kidnapped, what it really means is that excellence is being kidnapped.
Sadly. Thanks again for being here.
The pleasure is all mine.